They thought the water house was just an old ruin, until something inside stared back. The windows were all smashed in by generations of kids throwing rocks and stones at them. It was there where my mama and her siblings were kids played over the heath, and they all told us it spooked them and their mates as it did us. It was a really hot day one summer, in the school holidays. The older boys were at home for some reason, and all the younger cousins, me included, were being little brats. Over the heath, there was an ancient crumbling water house where the entire estate's water system was managed. Believe me, we thought it was a miracle how anything that old and manky could keep and pump out any water, but it did. It was made with bricks, with a black slate roof and iron doors, although at the time of this incident, it was just a shadow of its former self and didn't have any doors. So the boys said they would take us all blackberry picking to keep us quiet. Mama agreed gratefully. The boys were really responsible and mature at 16, 17, and 18. They babysat for us younger kids all the time, so we all knew the rules of staying close to the boys and doing what they told us, and so, a half hour later, everyone had their fruit buckets and we were off. There were 5 of us younger kids. We were all really excited, as blackberry picking was a great family favorite activity and our Gran's blackberry pies were the best. Gran's house led directly onto the back of the heath. There was a fence with a gap at the end. One of my older cousins passed me through to the other, then lifted my tiny wheelchair over the fence. The other kids were through in seconds and we were away again. On our way to our destination, the older boys told us spooky stories, as they always did, half because they liked scaring us, and half because we all used to beg them too. There was nothing more terrifying than a story from my cousins H or B. They were masters and so believable. We loved it. We all stopped talking when we came to the water house. Nobody ever dared to speak around or near the water house, not even the older boys. For something so mundane, it always looked and still does so eerie. There was a second fence to get through before we reached our beloved blackberry field, but this time, as we squeezed through the gap of the fence, we were all more somber as we remembered the old wives' tale urban legend that we all knew about the water house. The story goes, once in the early 1960s, there was a gang of bank robbers. They were local to the area and were really nasty pieces of work. Their expertise was terrorizing bank customers and staff alike before grabbing and shooting anything that moved. They did several jobs without getting caught, but they really messed up a particular job, and a sweet 19-year-old trainee bank clerk was shot dead and 5 more people were seriously injured. One of the gang was also shot dead, along with the nastiest member of the gang being seriously wounded. In the crossfire, it is said that the remaining gang members escaped with just a few hundred and made their way over to the heath and hid out in the water house. It was newish at that time and was a perfect hideaway for the murderers. There was a lot of contention and stress between the remaining gang months, although it was never proven how the bodies of all 3 of the remaining gang members were discovered, rotting away in the water house 6 months later. A few years after the weird stuff and creepy noises started occurring near and around the water house, mysterious hairy figures were glimpsed moving stealthily amongst the pipes and wires. A dank, moldy, rotten smell like aging river weeds was always smelt around the area of the water house, and eerie wails and menacing murmurs could be heard day and night. In the late 70s, there was a spate of mysterious deaths of homeless people who would shelter over the heath not too far from the water house. There was nothing to ever link the deaths to the water house, but the locals soon started giving the water house and surrounding area a wide berth because of the creepy history and dark reputation, and that left the water house abandoned and in disrepair. In the late 70s, there was a spate of mysterious deaths of homeless people who would shelter over the heath not too far from the water house. There was nothing to ever link the deaths to the water house, but the locals soon started giving the water house and surrounding area a wide berth because of the creepy history and dark reputation, and that left the water house abandoned and in disrepair. That's what we knew of the water house's dark history. That is why we were so wary and anxious to get away from it as quickly as possible. When we were all through the gap in the fence further away from the water house, us younger cousins built up enough courage to glance over at the building of ill repute. Before being rounded up by the older boys, put me in my wheelchair again, and we set off to the blackberry field. We soon arrived at the field, where some other local kids we knew were already there, and we spent a nice afternoon picking and eating the juicy sweet blackberries and splashing in the river, and soon the sun was getting low and it was time for home. Our journey home was much like the one there. We were still bantering, laughing, and the older boys were still winding us up slightly. But being as it was getting later, we were feeling wearier and slightly subdued. When we reached the fence before the water house, the air felt slightly too close, like before a thunderstorm. The youngest of the three older boys got me out of my wheelchair so that B could lift it over the fence. The other kids were already on the other side of the fence with H and B. A suddenly said to his brother in a low, guarded voice. Something moved at the back of their groove. B just looked at him sideways. Out of the boys, it was the most likely one to pull a stunt or wind anyone up for a laugh, but it was straight-faced. I said, "I'm going to have a look," passing me through to B and squeezing past us all. Wait up, AWEVE got T. Having put me in my wheelchair, B had moved forward towards his brother when we all heard a shriek out in horror and disgust, and the two boys moved back quickly. H, having already taken me out of my wheelchair again, had told everyone to run, and we did. B picking up my tiny wheelchair, folding it up while running. Grabbing the other two kids' hands and following B and H running with me on his shoulders, holding my other cousin's hands. We ran and ran. I kept saying, "Don't look back. Don't look back." I did, but saw nothing. We didn't stop till we got to the fence, which leads back to the road on the estate, and we could actually see civilization again. We were all completely exhausted, especially the older boys. Before we slipped through the fence to the road, B, holding himself up by the railings, asked, "What did you see? Y. Yellow eyes, H. Hairy face." All of us younger kids began to panic and scream, and H had to calm us all down. He said that we were safe and it would be all right. But we all wanted to get as far away from the water house as possible. When we got home, we all looked bedraggled and slightly nervy. Mama and my auntie noticed this and asked the boys what was wrong. H just said that we just got spooked by an old drunk man in the bushes looking for golf balls to sell. And as that was quite commonplace over the heath, Mama and my auntie just gave us kids a pep talk and hugged us. We never did tell my mama or my auntie the truth about the yellow eyes and hairy face or find out what it actually was, but us kids didn't go near the water house for a long time after. I used to search for ghosts until one tried to walk into my living room. I know this thread is a little old, but I want to share my experience. So I've always had weird things happen. I can't explain my whole life and have always believed in the paranormal. But what made me stop searching for the paranormal is something I wish to never experience again in my life. It wouldn't have been as bad if it wasn't in my own house that me, my wife, sister-in-law, and son all live in, and just started reaching for people and started reaching for someone in the corner. I picked him up and ran out of the room. Keep in mind that was before the Ouija board. Then I started playing with the Ouija board. And every time I would talk to a ghost named Del. Well, I got curious, looked up on my state's death records. I found a girl, died of a car crash in the same county I lived in, named Delcy Ray. As I typed this, my lights flickered. I haven't experienced anything since I've saged the house after the story I'm about to tell you. All the information Del gave me matched up with this girl, except she said she was 6 and the girl was 9. Which may make sense if she was sitting on the opposite side of the Ouija board. A 6 would look like a 9 to a kid. But this isn't the part that freaked me out to no end. Objects would move from one side of the room to the other when I would turn my back. We had a little chair on our front porch that would sit up next to the house facing towards the road. It was a kid chair for my son. Some days I would come home and this chair would be sitting face the door to our house. I didn't think nothing of it because my in-laws were in and out of the house all the time. No problem, I would just move it back. Well, one day it was just me and my sister-in-law at home. I had just got home 30 minutes prior to this happening. The chair was in the spot it was supposed to be. I was in our living room walking towards the hallway and I was about 2 feet from the window the chair normally sits in front of. I hear a noise on the porch. I look outside. I see no one. Keep in mind the door is only about 7 to 8 feet from this window. I run to the door, I open it, and the chair is sitting facing towards the door. I freak out. I yell for my sister-in-law, who walks into the hallway from the kitchen, and she sees it and freaks out. And she didn't even know that I had been coming home to it like that till after that happened, and I told her. Still not the freakiest part yet. I was home alone. During all this, we decided to get a pet pig, so we could blame the stuff happening on him to ease our conscience. Well, we had baby gates up at both entrances to the living room to keep the pig from getting into everything in the house. So it was just me and the pig at home. Everyone was gone for the night, so I wanted to enjoy my night gaming. I'm playing with my friends, having a great night, when I felt like I was being watched. So I turn around to see a girl, pale white, not see-through, long black hair, black eyes, peeking around the doorway. Reaching for the baby gate to open it, it instantly dashed around the doorway. I screamed nitrogen monoxide at the top of my lungs. My friends were freaking out through my headset. They thought I was being robbed. I told one of them to come over right now. And I stayed pinned against the TV watching both entrances to the living room until they got there. The next day, we saged the house, and I vowed to never play the Ouija board in my own house ever again. And if I ever did play it, I would sage myself and my house every time. And that was only some of the things that happened. There's a lot more that I left out, but putting them all would be way too much. But that's the gist of the story of how I stopped seeking the paranormal.